For years, people assumed Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban lived in a world insulated from chaos, a soft, luminous universe of red carpets, tender glances, and a love story that survived where Hollywood marriages usually went to die. They looked synchronized, balanced, almost eerily serene. Every photo of them, every interview, every award show moment suggested the same thing: stability, harmony, devotion that had somehow evaded the gravitational pull of fame. Fans believed it, the press believed it, even their closest friends believed it. But the truth of their marriage was far stranger, far darker, and far more fragile than anyone outside their home ever realized. And the moment it finally cracked open was not during a fight, or a scandal, or a breaking point. It was during an ordinary evening at home, one that began with a bowl of burned pasta and a single, careless comment that slipped out of Keith's mouth before he even registered what he was saying. It had been a long day for both of them. Nicole had come home from a tense round of rehearsals for a new film, a psychological thriller that was already starting to invade the edges of her mind the way intense roles tended to do. Keith, meanwhile, had spent the afternoon wrestling with a melody that refused to resolve, leaving him restless and irritable in the subtle way only musicians understand. When Nicole walked into the kitchen, her shoulders slumped under invisible weight. Keith looked up from the stove and said, without thinking, "You look like you've been somewhere else all day." It wasn't an accusation, but it wasn't gentle either. Nicole froze. Something flickered in her eyes, a flash of pain too quick for most people to catch, but unmistakable to someone who had lived beside her for nearly 2 decades. She tried to smile, but it wavered, then collapsed entirely. "I don't want to talk about today," she said quietly, dropping her bag onto the counter with a soft thud. Keith sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not trying to start anything. I'm just saying, you're not here. You haven't been here for a while." The silence that followed felt like a pressure drop, the kind that precedes a storm. Nicole took a slow breath, eyes fixed on the floor. "Keith, please." He should have stopped. He knew it, but the words had already begun tumbling out. "I'm tired of feeling like your shadow," he said. "I'm tired of wondering when you're actually with me and when you're somewhere else entirely." Her head jerked up. "My shadow? That's not what I meant." "No, that is exactly what you meant." He tried to backtrack, to soften it, to explain himself, but the moment had already slipped out of his hands. Nicole stood there trembling, not visibly, not dramatically, but in a way he could sense rather than see. "I don't know who I am to you anymore," she whispered. "Some days I feel like a ghost in this house." The words hit him like a physical blow. Before he could respond, she turned and walked toward the bedroom. Not quickly, not angrily, just depleted, as though something inside her had quietly folded. Keith followed her 10 minutes later, intending to apologize, but the bedroom was empty, the closet too. Her phone was gone, her coat was missing from the rack. She had left. She had never done that before, not in all their years together. Even during the worst arguments, the most stressful film shoots, the heaviest emotional spirals, she had never simply walked out without a word. He tried calling, straight to voicemail, texting, no response. He tried her assistant, her sister, her driver. No one had heard from her. No one knew where she was going. By the time midnight came and went, Keith was pacing the house in frantic circles, replaying every moment of the past few weeks, searching for a clue, a warning sign, something he had missed. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized the truth he had been too afraid to admit. Nicole had been slipping away long before tonight. Not physically, emotionally, quietly, deliberately. He had noticed it in small things. The way she lingered by the window at night, staring at something only she could see. The way she sometimes flinched when he touched her shoulder from behind. The way she kept saying, "I'm fine," in a tone that meant the opposite. The way she smiled for cameras with effortless grace, only to collapse into silence once the door closed. When dawn finally began to creep across the sky, Keith grabbed his keys and started driving. He didn't have a destination. He just knew he couldn't stay still. He checked every place he could think of: her favorite coffee shop, the riverside trails she walked when she needed clarity, the quiet street where they once spent 3 hours talking about their future. Nothing. He was about to give up when he remembered something she had once said years ago during a rare moment of vulnerability. "There's a part of me that only feels safe when I'm nowhere." He had laughed at the time, thinking she was being poetic. But now, in the empty echo of their home, he realized she had been telling him the truth. He drove another hour before he finally saw her car, parked on a cliff overlooking the city, headlights off, engine cold, as though it had been there for hours. He approached the driver's side cautiously, afraid of what he might find. Nicole was sitting inside, arms wrapped around herself, face pale and still. She didn't look at him when he tapped on the window. She didn't move when he opened the door. She simply whispered, "I don't know how to be the person everyone thinks I am." Keith climbed into the passenger seat, heart lodged somewhere between his ribs and throat. "You don't have to be," he said softly. "Not with me." "I don't know how to be anything else," she said, voice cracking. "I've been performing for so long, I don't know where the performance ends." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Not out of rejection, but out of fear he didn't understand yet. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. She stared at the horizon, the faint line where night dissolves into morning. "That if you saw everything I keep hidden, you wouldn't stay." He swallowed hard. "Try me." That was the night everything shifted. Not dramatically, not instantly, but subtly, like a tectonic plate shifting beneath the surface, unnoticed until the tremor hit months later. Nicole confessed things she had never told anyone, childhood memories that had left bruises on her imagination, roles that had burrowed too deeply under her skin, nights when she looked at her own reflection and felt detached from the woman staring back, the loneliness of fame, the exhaustion of always being observed, always being analyzed, always being expected to be extraordinary. And then she said something that made Keith's breath catch. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I disappear from you because I'm scared you'll see that I'm hollow. That all of this," she gestured vaguely to the space between them, "is just a house built on sand." He cupped her face gently. "I don't want the performance," he said. "I want you." Her eyes filled with tears. "And what if I don't know who that is?" From that night on, something changed in their marriage. Not in the way tabloids dream of, with explosive fights or dramatic ultimatums, but in quieter, more insidious ways. Keith became hyper-aware of Nicole's moods, her silences, the tremors in her voice when she said she was fine. He tried to give her space without abandoning her, tried to protect her without suffocating her, tried to hold her without gripping too tightly. Nicole, meanwhile, began retreating into a version of herself he barely recognized. Not colder, not distant, just fragile, as though she had cracked open on that cliff and was still trying to gather the pieces. The turning point came 6 months later, during what was supposed to be a simple dinner at home. They had cooked together, laughing, teasing, moving around each other in easy patterns carved by years of shared routines. But midway through the meal, Nicole suddenly went silent, completely silent. Her fork hovered in the air, her gaze dropped to her plate. Keith asked softly, "Nikki, talk to me." She set the fork down with a shaking hand. "I can't do this anymore." His heart plummeted. "Do what?" She looked at him with eyes filled with devastation. "I feel like I'm disappearing again, and I don't know how to stop it." Keith stood up, moved around the table, and knelt beside her chair. "Tell me what you need." She closed her eyes. "To stop being strong." He took her hands gently. "Then stop." She let herself collapse into him, body trembling, breath shallow. For a long moment they stayed like that, two people holding each other like lifelines, in a house that suddenly felt both too small and too vast. That night, Nicole told him everything. Things she had buried so deep she couldn't tell whether they were memories or shadows. The pressure of perfection, the crippling expectation of always being composed, the fear that the version of her the world adored was just a mask stretched too thin over something fractured. "I'm scared you'll get tired of this, of me." Keith kissed her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." She let out a trembling breath. "I don't know how to believe that." In the following weeks, their marriage entered a strange, delicate phase. Nicole tried to let Keith into the places she usually kept locked. Keith tried to show her that intimacy wasn't something she had to earn. But healing is messy. It backtracked. It stumbled. It scraped its knees on old wounds. And then came the night that changed everything. Nicole had been filming for 12 hours straight. Keith had spent the day in the studio, but nothing was working. Every chord progression sounded like an echo of something he'd written before. When Nicole came home, she looked exhausted. Keith tried to be gentle, but he was drained too. They argued. Not loudly, not violently, just enough to reopen every unresolved fear between them. Nicole stood by the window, arms crossed. "I can't keep apologizing for falling apart." "I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to let me in. And I'm telling you I don't know how." He took a step toward her. "Then teach me how to help you." She shook her head, eyes bright with frustration. "I can't teach you something I don't understand myself." The argument spiraled, words sharpened, old fears resurfaced. His frustration, her fragility, his patience, her guilt. Finally, Nicole whispered, "Maybe you'd be happier with someone who isn't broken." He froze. "Don't say that." "Why?" she whispered. "Every time I try to be honest, it hurts you." "It doesn't hurt me," he said quietly. "It scares me because I can't lose you." Nicole looked away. "You don't have to lose me. I'm right here." "No," he said softly. "Not all the time." She turned back to him, tears finally spilling. "Then what do I do? Tell me what to do, Keith. Tell me how to be someone who doesn't disappoint you." "You already are," he said, voice breaking. "You just don't believe it." She covered her face with her hands and whispered, "I'm so tired." He pulled her into his arms. She let him hold her.
For the first time in months, she didn't resist. And that was the moment he realized something fundamental. She wasn't asking for rescue. She was asking for permission to stop pretending.
He carried her to the bedroom, not because she was weak, but because she was exhausted in a way sleep alone couldn't fix. She curled against him, trembling like someone afraid of her own heartbeat. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. If I disappear again, come find me." His throat tightened. "Always." But he didn't expect her to disappear again, not the way she did, not so completely, not so quietly. It happened 2 months later. One morning, Keith woke to find Nicole's side of the bed empty. He assumed she was in the kitchen. But when he walked downstairs, the silence felt wrong. Her keys were gone, her phone was missing, the back door was unlocked. He called her name. No answer. He searched the house. Nothing. A creeping dread gripped him, the same dread he had felt months earlier. He drove to every familiar place. Still nothing. Hours passed. Then, at 5:42 p.m., she called. He answered instantly. "Nikki?" She said nothing for a moment. Then, "I'm at the house." Her voice sounded different, fragile but grounded. "The house?" he repeated. She meant the place she had gone months earlier, the cliffside house she never intended him to see. "I need you to come," she whispered. Keith arrived 30 minutes later. Nicole was sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers, journals, photographs, fragments of a past she had never sorted, never confronted, never forgiven. She looked up at him with a face defiant and broken at once. "This," she said, "is the part of me I was scared to show you." He knelt beside her and picked up one of the pages, a diary entry, dated 12 years earlier. One sentence circled 3 times. "I don't know if I'm allowed to be loved this much." Keith dropped the page. He took her face in his hands. "You're allowed," he whispered. "Always." Nicole closed her eyes, and for the first time, she let herself shatter. Not alone, with him. The next morning, they sat together in the tiny kitchen of the hidden house. Her head rested on his shoulder. His arm was wrapped around her waist, holding her as though she might evaporate if he loosened his grip. "I'm scared," she said softly. "I know. Scared you'll get tired of this." "I won't." "Scared I'll get tired of myself." He kissed her temple, "Then let me hold the parts you can't." She looked up at him with wet eyes. "Why do you stay?" He answered without hesitation, "Because there's a version of you the world will never see. The one who cries in my arms, the one who breaks and rebuilds, the one who thinks she isn't enough. And that's the one I love most." Nicole let out a breath that sounded like relief and surrender. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Always," he said again. And this time, she believed him. For the first time. Not because he said it, but because she had finally shown him everything she once hid. And he was still there, still holding her, still choosing her, still loving her without conditions. For the first time in her life, Nicole Kidman allowed herself to be loved completely. And for the first time in his, Keith Urban realized he had been waiting years for this moment. The moment she stopped running, stopped performing, stopped hiding. The moment she came home. Not to their house, to him.